Welcome to Difference Makers, the podcast that explores people making a difference across planet Earth. I am your host, Joni Readout. On this episode of Difference Makers, I'm here with Jamie Richards. Jamie serves as the Youth Adult Minister for Revive at Luthern Church of Hope in Iowa. Jamie began her journey into ministry by serving as camp counselor, discipleship team member, and as an assistant program coordinator at Riverside Bible Camp in Story City, Iowa. After college, she spent time in the greater Seattle area, serving as a youth minister before returning home to Central Iowa. Thank you for being with us, Jamie. We're excited to hear about your difference maker experiences.
Thanks for having me. I'm really honored that you asked and happy to be here with you today.
Thank you. Who are the people in your life that have been difference makers, and how have those people been difference makers in your life?
It's such a good question, and I love that you have a podcast dedicated to this, and I just think that we're all going to be enriched by it. So good job. I have realized throughout my life, more particularly lately as I've been in an aging and reflecting period, that I have so many people that have poured into me over the course of my life. I'm really lucky. My parents were awesome, and they always made sure that we had other awesome adults in our life. But you don't really think about it when you're a kid. It just is what it is. And so we were a part of a really small church that was like a family, and there were always adults pouring into me there. We switched churches when I was in 6th grade. Same scenario at the next church. Same scenario when I was in college. I went to a small liberal arts college in Iowa, and kind of just all the way up. So I realized that I've been really lucky to have a lot of people that have been difference makers in my life, but there were 2 or 3 that really stood out when I looked at this question. And one of them, if he ever hears this, he won't roll his eyes, but he'll be like, oh my gosh, Jamie, stop. But my current boss. So I report to Jeremy at Hope, West Des Moines. He's the outreach pastor at our Hope West Des Moines campus. And when I started at Hope, he was who hired me, and I've reported to him for the last 7.5 years. And he's so encouraging. He's always encouraged me to think about what I want to do next. And he was one of the many people that inspired me to go to seminary. And so I went to seminary, and he was really supportive through the whole journey of twists and turns, because life is never as linear as you think it's going to be. So Jeremy is someone who's really made a huge difference in my life. He's always been really encouraging. He's really good at problem solving. When I have a situation that I can't kind of, just figure out and work my way around, he's really helpful. So that's one person. And then another person that I just think about as being a difference maker for me is a gal named Annabelle. When I was in college, I lived in the dorms all 4 years. I think in a big part because of her, she was our residence hall director. So freshman and sophomore year, I was just a part of residence hall life. And then she saw leadership potential in me and encouraged me to step into some leadership positions that I probably never would have. I didn't ever grow up thinking that I was a leader or that I had capacity to lead people. And she was like, no, I think you should apply for XYZ. And so I ended up being an RA in college and then leading our dorm as our discipleship intern for campus ministry. And I'm pretty sure all of that really, there were other encouragers, but that was mostly her. So they made a difference. Both of these people and all these people have made a difference because they see me, they encourage me, they see things in myself that I don't even see. And sometimes that's just holding up a mirror, and saying, this is what I see in you. Because so often we all just minimize our own gifts or skills or talents or whatever. And so, yeah, those are 2 of the people that have really made a big difference for me.
It's cool. Yeah, to think about, that's been something that's been consistent in my interviews, gosh, all the people. But then it is interesting that we can usually drill down to 2 or 3 that are really the difference makers, either right now in life or as we've grown up. That's super cool.
Yes. And I think it's so important to realize, right? Someone at some point in time tapped me on the shoulder and invited me into something that I probably would have never stepped into, but it doesn't really take much to make a difference.
Right. It's just being conscious or yeah, the ability to think that and believe that we can do that for other people.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So as you think about the people that were difference makers for you, how have you been a difference maker in the lives of others?
Again, super good question. And this one was probably the hardest one for me to think through because I just do the things, right? But there's a couple things that came to mind. I've always felt or noticed that people tell me that I'm a good listener, that they feel like I'm a trustworthy human being, that I'm empathetic. I can't tell you if I had $1 for every time someone said, I feel like I could just tell you anything, and then just told me things in there, and they were like, I've never told anyone this. I think that one of the gifts that I have is just being open to people. It's important to me to be a calm, non-anxious, non-judgmental presence. I don't do that perfectly. I don't do that well all the time, right? No one does, but
Right.
that's a goal, just to know that people feel safe with you as a human being, because people need to know who's on their team and whatever. So I also I also just think that it's really important to me. Like, I think if I was gonna take a values assessment, honoring people would probably be high on my list. And I don't think we talk about that a ton as a culture. We talk about respect or, non-judgmental, whatever. But for whatever reason, in the last couple of years, the word honor has just been on my mind. Like, how do you honor someone? How do you make sure that their needs and wants and desires are being taken into account? Like, integrity is tied into that. Like, would you talk about this person the same way if they were in the room listening to this conversation? So there's all sorts of ways that we honor people. And I think, especially in our current, like, very politically polarized culture, it's really easy for people to feel like you have to agree and you have to get along on all things. Otherwise, like, you can't be on each other's team. And so even with the people in my life that I disagree with or have been friends with, and then realize, like, oh, we think very differently about some of these things.
Yeah.
I want them to know that I will always talk positively about them. And that comes about because I talk about other people positively to them. You know what I mean? Like, I
Yeah.
just think that respect and honor and pushing through the awkward things well is just really important. And again, I don't do that perfectly, but that's the goal.
Yeah. You're right about that word honor. Like that's making me think about like we do talk about respect and kindness and all those things. And I think about being a teacher and, teaching character, and the golden rule is at the top of my classroom. Right. And that's what we talk about that all the time. It's a reminder for me, but I don't know that I've thought about that recently either.
It's like a medieval word, like,
Yeah.
I wonder what would happen. And there's probably some good reason that it slipped out in our vocabulary, but it might be time to just take another look at honor and what it looks like to honor people. And yeah.
And especially if they're different from you, right? Like that's something that's come up in interviews for me too, like, which is, more today, I think, in the culture that we're living in, where it is, how do we get to a point where we are on the same team, even though we don't think the same? And how do we support each other, even though we don't think, we don't agree on every single thing?
Yeah, we have this phrase that I've been noticing more and more, and I've said it even myself until I've realized. And the phrase is just that, like, oh, our country is more divided than ever. Here's the thing. Our country has been through a civil war. We've been through a lot as a country. I don't think that we're actually more divided now than we've ever been. I just think that we have more access to other people's opinions because of social media and blogs and the internet and all that, right? And so I don't know if we're more divided than ever. I think we just are more like entrenched in our own positions or something. Like, I just
Yes. And we see all of that, right? It used to be you had to go talk to somebody and you would be in those deep conversations with that person that you trusted to have those open conversations. And now I feel like the open conversations are just, you almost know about them and their opinions before you even know the person.
100%.
Which is where that part about, the safe and not non-judgmental that you brought up. Yeah, that's such an interesting thing to think about. I'm glad you brought that up. That's going to keep my wheels spinning.
Yeah. Yeah, I had the really unique experience recently, earlier this month, to teach at Des Moines Medical University in the PA program about spirituality. One of my old friends, you can't make old friends. He had been a PA of mine once upon a time when I was going through some chronic health things, and was at a specialist's office, and she was my PA, and now she works at Des Moines University, which is a medical school here in Des Moines. And she's working with the PA program, and there's like a wellness unit class where they needed to talk about spirituality, and she was having a hard time finding anyone. So she reached out, and I was just thinking through, like, I don't know anything to teach to PA students. Like I do ministry, not medicine. Like those are two very different career paths. But then when she and I talked through it, I realized, I mean, most of what we talked about in this class session was, when religion comes up, you got to know it's really important to people. And if they don't think that you have their best interests in mind, they're going to push back on your treatment if it conflicts with religion, or any sort of religious perspective on treatment, and all sorts of those issues that come up there. And so it was really amazing to be like, oh my gosh, these are principles that still do apply in other areas of our life, but we're just going to bring them into a medical healthcare setting as well, and say that these things do apply here too. Becoming a trustworthy person, knowing that you have someone's best interest. Yes, their spirituality might, in a PA's perspective, like get in the way of, I'm using air quotes around that, treatment options, but really you're just trying to find something that will help be an integrated option for people. So anyway, it's about listening. It's about non-judgmental presence, open-ended questions, honor, all these things.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about that as well, and how that really comes up in all areas of life.
Yeah. And I like I just do the things. I think that's going to be a quote. I do the things as a difference maker. That's awesome. Yeah. What are attributes that you see in people who are difference makers?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's some of the things we've already talked about, but maybe putting a different spin on it. There's so many leadership gurus, and so there's a few that I just kind of keep tabs on. And I try to be like really to have like a diverse approach and perspective, so that it's not just one voice that's talking about leadership, but it's a variety of voices. But there's this one guy named John Maxwell who's been around for a long time. And I remember reading about his leadership stuff like in high school and college. And there's one of his bits, you can go online and watch it on YouTube, that he does, that I think is a really well-known thing about, there's like these 5 steps, and I don't remember all of them, but the first one is, do you value people? And so valuing people is the first place to start, and then thinking of ways to value people and show them that you value them. And then 3 is like actually showing people that you value them. I think number 4 is like reflecting at the end of the day, did I value people today? And then number 5 might be like encouraging other people to add value or whatever. Like, I truly just think that difference makers are always looking out for other people. Difference makers are making a difference because they're not just self-centered. They're also other people centered. They're looking out for the interests of other people, looking out for the needs in the community, looking for gaps. Like, here's somebody's life and situation. They've got all of these resources, but what are the gaps in their life where they're lacking? And then working to help meet those needs, see the need, meet the need, sort of thing. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I feel like you're probably the expert on this after having interviews. What do you think? What are things that you think that are the habits of difference makers?
It's been consistent. It's about people, right? Which is where I started this. Like, it was, why did you become a teacher, and what's the impact of teachers? And as I was in schools and teaching alongside of people, I started to notice teachers that realize the difference we make every single second of every single day when we have hundreds of students coming in and out of our classroom. And I started to notice some teachers that I don't know realized that they were making a difference, whether they noticed or not. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the power, right? Is that we we as humans have to understand that every interaction we have with other people matters.
Yes. Can I share a story about that?
Yes.
Okay. So when I was in this class in college, this isn't the story, but it's the preface to the story. When I was in this class in college, one of the assignments at the beginning of the semester was to think about the three most impactful situations that we had found ourselves in, period, in life thus far to college. So I sat down and I couldn't tell you the other two, but there's one that I thought of because of that class. And I think it has stuck with me because I had to like write about it for an assignment. So um when I was in high school, my church youth group went on a mission trip with another church, and we went to this organization that like has a really nice blend of students coming with their youth groups or church groups or community groups or whatever from all across the country. And they divide all of these groups up so that you're mixing with kids from all these different places on your individual work site or whatever. So we were on our site where we were serving, and there was this gal named Hillary, and I didn't know her. She was from a different location, but we were just serving together that week. And we were on very different sides of our working location. So we didn't really interact a ton. But whenever we would like go refill our paint bucket or whatever, I'd just say, hi, how are you? Smile, whatever. Like I'm just, I'm just being me.
Yeah.
And at the end of the trip, which if you've ever gone on like a youth group trip or a camp thing, like the last night is just always emotional. Like you've made all these really good friends, everyone's kind of feeling the feels. And so I find this girl, and she's absolutely her name is Hillary. She's absolutely sobbing, and she asks if we can talk. And I said yes. And so some other gals from my church and I went and sat with her, and through her tears, she talked about how she'd struggled with mental health. She'd struggled with thoughts of suicide. She actually had attempted in the past, and she had told herself, and this is, maybe I should have prefaced this with a little trigger warning, but she'd said, before coming on this trip, knew that I was going to go home and attempt again. But because of the way that you treated me this week, because of the way that you smiled, the way that you just like asked how I was doing, I realized that my life mattered, and I'm not going to go home and do that. And I'm just an 18-year-old, and I have no idea how to respond to that sort of thing. And I was just like,
Right.
that isn't even me. Like that's love.
Yeah.
That's respect, that's honor, that's not Jamie being nice to you. But I was able to make a big difference just because I think it's important to let people know that they're important too. And so that was one of the most transformative experiences of my life, knowing that just being kind to someone had saved someone's life.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's the impact. Like, that's the part that I want to highlight for people. Like, we don't know what's happening to other people. And you had the opportunity for her to share that with you. But like saying hi and smiling at people and using eye contact, that's one of the simplest things that we can do. Use someone's name, say hello, and smile at them. I'm a morning person. I am morning big time. And so when I show up to school, I'm always like full of energy and like, hey, and I go around and I tell everybody hi and make sure to greet my kids when they come in too. And I've had so many people in the last 15 years be like, what do you do? Like, how do you, and it's like, I choose to do that. But it has been unbelievable how many people will say, like, stop me and say, like, thanks for your energy, or thanks for always being positive. And it's not, you're right, it's doing the things. It's not Joni. I'm not intentionally going out of my way to do those things. I'm conscious that it makes a difference for other people. And it's the smallest things that we can do.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, this is a huge part of a lot of different world religions, right? And as somebody who follows Jesus and is a Christian myself, that's something that I know that I have received from God is God's unconditional love. Who am I to withhold that from somebody else? Like, I'm a very, very imperfect human. And so
Yes.
I'm really out of line if I'm like, they don't deserve love from me just because I'm mad at someone or whatever. So yes.
Right. And that ability to forgive, right? And I don't think we like thinking about that and that part of keeping in mind like our faith, and that part I always resonates with me. Like, how in the world do I have any place to stand on if I'm not willing to forgive? Good.
Yes.
We're all forgiven for all the imperfect things we're not
Feels a little
able
hypocritical,
to do.
doesn't it? Yes. Yes.
Yeah. I want to thank my guest today, Jamie Richards, and all of our listeners, because the real question here today is, how will you be a difference maker? How are you a difference maker? Is it some of the same things that Jamie is doing, or maybe something you want to do differently? We want to invite you to be a part of the conversation in the comments about how you are a difference maker. Remember, you have the ability to be a difference maker in the lives of others, and others need you. We impact people on a daily basis. Why not be the difference maker in the lives of others?